LeBron James stopped talking mid-interview, walked into the Tonight Show audience, and shared the painful truth he'd kept hidden for decades. The fatherless boy asking for help had no idea he was talking to someone who understood completely. It was a memorable Tuesday evening at Studio 6B in Rockefeller Center, where the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon was buzzing with that electric energy that made millions of viewers feel like they were witnessing something special. The studio was bathed in warm, golden light, creating that intimate atmosphere that had become Jimmy's signature. Behind his iconic curved wooden desk, Jimmy sat with his infectious smile, while the Roots provided their subtle musical backdrop that made every conversation feel like it was happening between lifelong friends. Across from him, occupying the guest chair that had welcomed everyone from presidents to pop stars, sat LeBron James. At 40 years old, he still commanded attention like the force of nature he'd always been. Wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, LeBron looked every inch the global icon he'd become. His presence filled the studio, not just because of his physical size, but because of the gravitas that comes with being one of the most influential athletes of all time. The interview had been flowing beautifully. They'd covered LeBron's recent milestone of becoming the oldest player in NBA history to score 40 points in a game, his continued excellence with the Lakers, and his ongoing legacy as the league's all-time leading scorer. Jimmy's genuine admiration for LeBron was evident in every question, every laugh, every moment that reminded viewers why great interviews feel like conversations between people who genuinely respect each other. "I have to talk about your scoring record," Jimmy said, leaning forward with that enthusiasm that had made him beloved by guests and audiences alike. "You passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to become the all-time leading scorer. That had to feel incredible." LeBron's face lit up with a mixture of pride and humility. "Man, Jimmy, that was surreal. To break a record that stood for almost 40 years, and to do it in front of Kareem himself. It was one of those moments where you realize how blessed you've been to play this game for so long. And you're still going strong at 40, Jimmy marveled. What drives you to keep playing at this level when you've already accomplished everything there is to accomplish?" LeBron paused thoughtfully, his expression becoming more serious. "You know, it's not about the accolades anymore, Jimmy. It's about the platform. It's about using this position to make a difference. When I was a kid growing up in Akron, Ohio, I didn't have many examples of what was possible. My life was complicated." "Tell us about that," Jimmy encouraged, sensing there was depth here that went beyond typical celebrity interview territory. "I was raised by a single mother," LeBron said, his voice carrying the weight of memory and gratitude. "My mom, Gloria, was everything to me. She was 16 when I was born, just a teenager herself, but she had incredible strength. We moved around a lot when I was little, 12 times before I was 8 years old. We were just trying to find stability, trying to find a place where we belonged." The audience was hanging on every word, sensing that this was more than just celebrity backstory. This felt real, vulnerable, important. "And my father..." LeBron paused, something shifting in his expression. "My father wasn't in the picture. Anthony McClelland. I've spent most of my adult life not talking about him because, honestly, what was there to say? He chose not to be part of my story." Jimmy nodded sympathetically. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," LeBron admitted. "As a kid, you wonder what you did wrong. You wonder if you weren't good enough, if you weren't worth staying for. Those are heavy thoughts for a child to carry." That's when the voice from the audience cut through the intimate conversation, like a prayer finding its way to heaven. "Mr. James." The voice was young, tentative, but carried a weight that immediately caught both men's attention. Jimmy turned toward the audience, his host instinct sensing a shift in the room's energy. LeBron looked toward the source, his athlete's awareness telling him that something significant was about to happen. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the voice continued, gaining strength, "but I have a question, and it's important." The camera swung toward the audience, and there he was, a boy who couldn't have been more than 12 years old, wearing a LeBron jersey that was slightly too big for his small frame. The jersey was clearly well worn, probably his most prized possession. He had the kind of serious expression that comes from carrying adult concerns on young shoulders, and his eyes held a mixture of hope and desperation that every person who'd ever felt abandoned would recognize. "What's your name, buddy?" Jimmy asked gently, his professional instincts kicking in while his human instincts told him to let this moment unfold naturally. "Marcus," the boy said, his voice trembling slightly. "Marcus Williams. I'm from Akron, Ohio." LeBron sat up straighter in his chair, something in the boy's tone and the mention of his hometown resonating with him in a way that transcended normal audience interaction. "Akron?" LeBron repeated softly. "What part?" "East Akron," Marcus said, and LeBron's eyes immediately filled with recognition and concern. East Akron was where LeBron had spent some of his most difficult childhood years. "What did you want to ask me, Marcus?" LeBron said, his voice gentler now, stripped of any performance. Marcus took a deep breath, and in that pause, you could feel the weight of a question that had been building inside him for years. "My dad left when I was 5, just like yours did. And sometimes I look around at all the other kids who have fathers, and I wonder, how did you become great without one? How did you not let it break you?" The studio fell completely silent. This wasn't just an audience question anymore. This was one soul reaching across the void to another, asking for a lifeline from someone who had walked this exact path. "Because some days," Marcus continued, his voice breaking slightly, "I feel like I'm not good enough. Like maybe there's something wrong with me that made him leave. And I want to be somebody, like you are, but I don't know how to do it without a dad to show me." LeBron stood up slowly from his chair. He didn't ask permission from Jimmy, or glance at the producers in the booth. He didn't worry about breaking the show's format or maintaining the careful choreography of late-night television. Something in Marcus's words had unlocked a door in his heart that had been carefully sealed for decades, and he simply walked around the desk, past the cameras, and into the audience. Behind him, Jimmy quietly stepped away from his position, understanding instinctively that this wasn't his moment to facilitate. This was something deeper, something sacred that required no host, no entertainment value, no commercial breaks. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in that studio understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Marcus," LeBron said as he reached the boy's row, his voice thick with emotion, "can I sit with you for a minute?" Marcus nodded, tears already streaming down his face. LeBron squeezed into the seat next to him, this giant of a man somehow making himself smaller so he could be at eye level with this child who was carrying the same wounds he had carried. "You want to know something I've never said on television before?" LeBron asked, his voice barely audible but picked up clearly by his wireless microphone. Marcus nodded again, his tear-streaked face looking up at this giant of a man who had somehow made himself small enough to meet him where he was. "I used to lie awake at night when I was your age, wondering what I had done to make my father not want to know me," LeBron said, his voice growing stronger as he shared this piece of his story. "I would imagine scenarios where he would come back, where he would see me play basketball and realize he had made a mistake. I thought maybe if I was better, stronger, more like the other kids whose fathers never left, maybe then he would come back." The audience was completely still, hanging on every word of this confession that had never been shared so publicly, so vulnerably. "And you know what I learned, Marcus?" LeBron continued, looking directly into the boy's eyes. "It wasn't about me. It wasn't about you. When a man chooses to walk away from his child, that's not a reflection of the child's worth. That's a reflection of his own fear, his own pain, his own inability to be what he was supposed to be." Marcus was sobbing now, but they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of feeling seen and understood for perhaps the first time in his young life. "But here's what else I learned," LeBron said, reaching out and placing a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You don't need a father to become a man. You need examples. You need people who believe in you. You need to understand that the absence of one person doesn't define your worth or your potential." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When I was 9 years old, a man named Frank Walker saw that my mom was struggling, and he took me into his home. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. He showed me what it looked like when a man keeps his word, when a man shows up, when a man takes responsibility." The studio audience was openly crying now, but these weren't just tears of sympathy. These were tears of recognition, of understanding that everyone in that room had been shaped by the presence or absence of people who were supposed to love them unconditionally. "Frank didn't replace my father," LeBron continued, "but he showed me that fathers aren't just the men who give you their DNA. Fathers are the men who choose to invest in your future, who see potential in you even when you can't see it in yourself." Marcus looked up at LeBron with wide eyes. But what if nobody chooses me? Marcus, LeBron said firmly, I'm choosing you, right now, in front of all these people. I'm choosing to invest in your future because I see something in you that you might not see in yourself yet. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, but not just any business card. It was a special card that he kept for moments like this, though moments like this were rare. This has my personal contact information, not my agent's, not my manager's, mine, and I want you to use it. Marcus took the card with trembling hands. But more than that, LeBron continued, I want to invite you to become part of something. You've heard of the LeBron James Family Foundation, right? Marcus nodded. We have a mentorship program specifically for young men who are growing up without fathers. It pairs them with successful men from all walks of life, not just athletes, but teachers, business owners, doctors, artists, men who understand what it means to overcome obstacles and want to help the next generation do the same. LeBron's voice grew more passionate as he spoke. And Marcus, I want you to know something else. Every championship I've won, every record I've broken, every success I've achieved, none of it would have been possible if I had let my father's absence define my future. Instead, I let it fuel my determination to be the man he never was. Jimmy approached them then, his own eyes bright with tears. LeBron, this is incredible. Marcus, you came to exactly the right place tonight. Actually, LeBron said, a new determination entering his voice, I have an idea. Marcus, what school do you go to in Akron? Bucktail Elementary, Marcus said quietly. Well, I'm going to make some calls tomorrow, LeBron smiled. Because your school is about to get a brand new basketball court, and I'm going to come back to Akron next month to help dedicate it, and you're going to help me cut the ribbon. The audience erupted in applause, but through it all, Marcus's voice could be heard. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you, LeBron replied, for reminding me why I do this work in the first place. As they embraced, Jimmy stepped forward to address the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice thick with emotion, sometimes the most important conversations happen when we stop trying to entertain and start trying to connect. The episode that aired became the most watched Tonight Show segment in 2 years, shared millions of times across social media. More importantly, it sparked a national conversation about fatherlessness and the role that successful men could play in breaking cycles of abandonment. 6 months later, Marcus Williams stood next to LeBron James at the dedication of the new basketball court at Bucktail Elementary School. As they cut the ribbon together, Marcus was wearing a brand new Lakers jersey signed with a message. Champions aren't born, they're chosen, and I choose you, LeBron. And when the local news interviewed Marcus that day, his answer was simple. I want to be the kind of man who chooses kids like me. Because sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't what you accomplish for yourself, it's what you inspire others to become.